Inside the X is a short newsletter every Friday designed to give you some fun right before the weekend. It'll include links to blog posts, articles, books, quotes, and recent purchases I've made. Everything is handpicked to add value to your life. To join, email entertainmentxpodcast@gmail.com.
Good morning, Vietnam!
But it ain't about how hard you hit. It's about how hard you can get hit and keep moving forward.
To infinity and beyond!
Some people without brains do an awful lot of talking, don't they?
It's classified.
You talking to me?
I could tell you, but then I'd have to kill you.
I can't fly!
Expecto Patronum!
Entertainment X.
You never know what you're gonna get.
For this episode, I sit down and chat with Bruce Daitch. Bruce and I actually met through Broadway Dreams, which is this wonderful foundation that gives opportunities to young professionals entering the Broadway performing space. So him and I chat about his previous job where he was head of production for DreamWorks and what he's been doing since then. Bruce has a lot of great insight on his career path and the decisions he's made. So I hope you enjoy this episode and keep on keeping on. We're back. I'm Clayton Howe, and today with me is Bruce Daitch. Bruce, thank you for joining me today. I'm excited to talk to you. We met at Broadway Dreams Foundation. How did you join Broadway Dreams Foundation?
God, this is such a great story. I would say at about 2010, I had just finished helping produce a live arena show based on the How to Train Your Dragons franchise of DreamWorks.
Oh, cool.
So we took the film and we had come across a company in Australia that was doing Walking with Dinosaurs, okay, this documentary tour that was unbelievable with these animatronic figures that were life-size.
Oh my.
And we were blown away. We were in the middle of producing How to Train Your Dragons. And the thought was, how cool would it be if we could make dragons fly in an arena?
Yeah.
Could we? So we ended up partnering with this company in Australia. And I went there probably 7 times in a 2-year span. And we launched in Australia. And then we went to New Zealand to show it in Auckland.
Okay.
And then we ended up back in the States and toured it in 26 cities. I just got back from New Zealand from launching the tour. And friends of mine flew in from Atlanta and they asked me to join them for dinner with a bunch of friends. And sitting next to me was this gal, Annette. And Annette's the type of person, she's bigger than life. Her accent, of course, is charmingly wonderful. She's also a Kiwi. So we just started talking. I asked her, is she from New Zealand? She said yes. We started talking about the How to Train Your Dragon show. I said, well, what are you doing here? She said she's executive director for Broadway Dreams, and they're looking to expand their development efforts into the LA market. So they had never done anything here, and they were looking for a venue to do a fundraiser. And it didn't even cross my mind other than to say, well, if you need a place, why don't you use my house? So I donated my house for their fundraiser. And what was most funny is the next day, I think I texted Annette to just say, hey, nice to meet you. When would you like to do the fundraiser? And her response is, are you kidding? Like that was for real? She thought that was an LA gesture, and I'm doing air quotes now. Which, of course, I was terribly offended by, saying, like, what do you mean? Of course I meant, why would I say it?
In the moment you offer it. But
she was like, you are just kidding. She said, if you're serious, this is amazing. So for the next, I would say 4 or 5 years, the annual fundraiser was hosted at my house. And they brought in Ryan Redman of Broadway Dreams. They brought in a whole bunch of performers, and they set up my house as a venue. And it was a fundraiser, and it was the first time we had entered the LA market. It was before they actually did a summer intensive there. Okay, so that was kind of paving the way for doing that. And every year, Annette and the board members that I had met, and it was just more social, and I was more of a friend of. Every year they'd say, when can you join the board? And every year I said, it's just not going to happen. I've never been on a board before. I don't know what that entails. My job okay, allows me to be able to participate. So any minute spent outside of my regular job means that I can't be as generous towards a company like Broadway Dreams. And then I don't know what had happened, but my job, the DreamWorks was going really, really well. I was really fortunate. And one of my coworkers, who was very philanthropic, I brought him to a Broadway Dreams event, and he was the one that said, "You really should join the board. Why not join this board?" And he says, "I will help you." And my biggest fear was I don't know how to ask anybody for money. I'm sooner just give it if I can.
Yeah.
Asking somebody else, I'm uncomfortable. So I don't know how to fundraise. And he was like, "I'll help you. I'll teach you." So I called up Annette and I said, "Okay, I'm ready."
That's so
And, within 2 months or so, they did whatever they do to get the approval. And I joined the board probably about 4 years ago, I'm going to say.
Wow.
And I have tried to get more and more involved. I finally went with them to an international city. I went to Brazil and experienced an intensive from start to finish.
Right.
And every time I've participated in an event, I've walked away saying, I got to do more. I have to do more. I've never been filled with so much joy and so much reward as this. What else can I do? And they have an annual showcase performance in New York, which is the creme de la creme. It is the best of the best
Yes,
of
it is.
all of the performances around the world.
Yeah.
And when I was in the international city of Brazil, I actually sponsored a couple of students to fly.
Oh, cool.
So I kind of wanted to be here in New York to kind of receive them and be part of their journey of the first time ever to be in New York, in Broadway, feeling like they're Broadway stars, if you will.
Yeah.
So I wouldn't miss it for the world.
Yeah.
So I flew in, and it was at that event that we actually met each other.
Yeah, and those kids were. When you say creme de la creme, you meet they are talented, all ages, very young through college. Some were going to college. That was an incredible event. I absolutely loved it. Okay, I have numerous questions here. Asking, how have you gotten better at asking, and what has he taught you about asking?
So probably the most important thing is to recognize you're not asking for yourself. You're asking about something else. So if I were to ask you for money for me, you kind of get very squirmish of like, well, why do I deserve and whatnot? The more you recognize that you believe in this other thing and you can describe its value, okay, the easier it is to actually talk to somebody else about saying, listen, you can see it for yourself. You're not like, I don't want people to think that they're doing me a favor. I want them to do it because of that and what they see and how it changes lives. I've flipped email comments that Annette has sent to me of kids, and these are terrible stories that ended well by saying, that they were thinking about taking their life. Okay, they just didn't know where to find a cause and a purpose, and they just felt like an outcast. And it wasn't until they met Annette and the Broadway Dreams family that they realized why they were on Earth and that it saved their life. And it was incomprehensible to me that it could have that kind of an impact. And once I got some of those, I actually said to Annette, send me more of those. Those are the type of things that will help explain what Broadway Dreams is and can be for a contributor. And that was the easiest. It's almost, it's selling itself, if you know what I mean.
Oh, yeah.
Versus me having to convince you to pay for something.
Right.
So it became easier. It's still not the easiest thing. Here's what I did, though. I invited 4 different people to that showcase. Okay, and that showcase was free. Okay, that was not meant as a fundraiser. The 4 people separately stopped me afterwards, and they said, "Where do I write a check? I'm in." Okay, and by the way, some of those people have been involved in Broadway Dreams in various where they've seen some things. I've invited them to the New York fundraising gala last year. Okay, and they wrote a very nice check, and it was very appreciative. Once they actually saw what they really do, not the fancy charity show, but the kids in their element doing what they do best, it was, I had, what do I do? How do I help? One person said, I want to join the board. One person actually said, this was so good that I'm going to double whatever I gave last year. It was those type of things. I didn't even have to ask. I just showed.
Yeah, that's perfect. That's perfect. And it makes so much sense because when you're working towards a larger cause, people want to help a larger cause, not just help myself or help you kind of thing.
It was incredible.
Yeah.
It was so much fun. I sat on the end of a 11-seat row, and I did it intentionally because I wanted to not only be able to see the performance, but I wanted to see the participants and see their faces and the amount of jaw drops and just their eyes bulging. And it was so cool to watch these people experience something that I have been experiencing for years.
Yeah.
It was such a validating moment for me of I told you so. And they just thanked me and they said, tell me what else I can do. Other than write a check, which we will, we want to do something else too. It was very cool.
The time. That's incredible. All right, I'm going to do a lot of jumping around here. I want to go back to what you mentioned about walking with dinosaurs real quick. Did you figure out how to make them fly?
We did.
You did.
It was unbelievable. So these guys named Global Creatures in Sydney, Australia. Okay. Their specialty at that point was making animatronics inside of a huge structure that could be skinned any which way. In fact, they are the ones behind the gorilla.
Oh, there you go.
On Broadway.
King Kong,
King
yeah.
Kong.
Yeah.
They're the company that produced it.
Oh,
okay.
cool.
So clearly they have found an additional path to use their animatronics, and that gorilla, as much as there are handlers, okay, there is a tremendous amount of animatronics and complexity that goes along with that. But so the task was, how to Walking with Dinosaurs was amazing, but it was all on the ground. How do we actually create flight? So the complexity of doing a flight track, okay, and having these dragons fly, breathe fire, and have enough animatronics built in that created life and emotion. So Toothless, as an example, there were emotions where they created, some muscular type of vehicles in the eye and the face and the cheeks and whatnot that actually allows expression and just the movement of the wing that emulated an arm, that when Toothless was like, comforting Hiccup. Yeah. And you felt the protection versus just a inanimate object. Right. So they were fantastic about bringing these things to life. So we ended up spending years trying to figure out how to do it. Yeah. And again, some of the biggest, silliest things were some of the tracks that had to be put up in arenas. They can't handle the weight of this. So you have to design knowing, well, it can't be more than 155,000, pounds or tons or whatever the weight was. Yeah. And then we were going to tour it through Europe. And again, Europe, the arenas were even smaller. So it had to be retrofitted for that. And it was the coolest, most fantastic thing that I think I've ever been a part of. Yeah. When that thing first came to light the first day in Australia, we just sat there and we were all goosebumps. We just couldn't believe it came to life. Yeah. Unbelievable.
What? Oh, wow. That's so cool. Okay, so rewinding back a ways, when you were a child, what did you want to be when you grew up? Was this entertainment? Did you always want to do entertainment?
Oh my God, you will. So I'm going to tell a funny story and then I'll go back. So if you'd look at my resume, you'd have one of two reactions. You'd either say very diverse or unbelievably confused. Okay? I have so many different things on my resume that clearly says to you, oh, there isn't a straight line here, not even close. I don't even know how to connect the dots. Okay. As a child, listen, I was a child where my mother was a performer. She went to the High School of Performing Arts. She was a singer. She was a dancer. She taught dance. She taught piano. My father's a lawyer, and my two older brothers were both more professional. One was a lawyer, one was a doctor, a dentist. And for me, I was just loving every single thing I could do. I was a singer. I played the piano. I performed, so I was always a performer. Didn't know if that's really what I wanted to do for a career. I don't think I thought further than how far I could see or touch. I loved everything, and I think that was great and a problem. You know, if when you're a child and you actually have this vision of, I want to be an X, then everything around it can actually be built towards that. When you actually don't have what the end result is, you kind of take each moment as like, well, that was fun. Let's do more of that. And then you keep finding things just through discovery. So I didn't really have a I want to be when I grow up moment. My father was super, super helpful with when I graduated from college. You know, he basically said, well, what kind of things are you interested in? And I'll introduce you to people. So that's kind of how I really happened upon my first job. And interestingly enough, I wasn't allowed to work really as a child because my parents felt as if their job was to make sure that I got schooled. So I wasn't allowed to really, you know, focus on getting a job while learning, while getting educated, because they felt like that was my full-time, then to be my full-time job. So my first real job other than summer camp things, my first job was out of college. And it's interesting. I went up to SUNY Binghamton. That's where I went to college, and I went through the interview process. And they had companies that came to SUNY to do the interview day and whatnot. And I interviewed everywhere and anywhere just because I had no idea, and everything looked interesting. It was like, oh my God, they're going to pay me. This is so cool. And Lord & Taylor called me, and they said, we'd like to fly you down for an interview to be part of the buying program. And all I thought was, you're going to fly me, you're going to pay for me, and you might want to hire me. And of course, they flew me down. I got the job, and I said yes, because I thought, you guys are going to pay me. This is so great. I had never had the experience of, you know, a job before. So this was my first job.
Right.
And I think all throughout, I probably was at each job for a year and a half. And I realized each time that it was fun, but I wanted more. So everything was fun, but I want more. So the first job was Lord & Taylor. The second was Republic National Bank as a banker, a private banker. The third was a Merrill Lynch stockbroker. Okay. And again, all of them were very, very successful from the point of view of I got good reviews, I got promoted, things like that. But what was most interesting is every time I took another job, okay, that was not in the same field, I took a financial pay cut. And after about 4 or 5 of those, my parents sat me down and they said, you do realize you go in the wrong direction, right? Like you're supposed to increase. And I said, no, but you guys, you don't understand. I'm changing careers, and therefore they're not going to pay me knowing the same thing that I made before, because I have to learn from the ground up some new expertise and some new skills. They heard me, but they were still kind of like, this guy is going to have a struggle. I'm not sure if they were convinced that I was actually going to make it on my own, to be honest. I then decided when I was at Merrill Lynch doing trading, okay, I was a broker. I decided it was that time that I thought, you know, I wanted to go for more schooling. I wanted to get my MBA. Okay. So I went back to NYU, and I went to school full time at night while I worked during the day. And I volunteered, and this was the first foray into entertainment. I decided I really wanted to do something in entertainment. So I figured, all right, do what everybody does, just, you know, volunteer. Yeah. So I volunteered, and I was working as an intern at Triad Artists, the talent agency. Okay. And I just answered phones and was in the mailroom and, you know, did the thing that you expect to do when you're just starting out. Right. So, and then on the weekends, I actually performed. So I actually did musical theater. Wow. So like I performed with like the Heights Players. You know,
yeah. So you grew up in...
I did. I grew up in New York. I grew up on Long Island. Yeah. And my parents had a place in Manhattan, so I would come back and forth quite a lot, but primarily Long Island.
Yeah, Long Island. Yep. I grew up out there in East Islip. I don't know if we talked about
closer.
that.
Mine's Merrick.
Okay, yeah. All right.
Closer.
What did your parents teach you about work ethic?
Anytime I got below an A, they didn't understand why I didn't get an A. So it was a very, you should be the best. You should always be looking out for how to help somebody else. You should be, you know, I was a good student, meaning I was the guy that was just studying and tried my best and was like the angel in school and never got in trouble, and, you know, maybe out of fear just because, you know, I didn't know what the consequence was. I just wanted to be the good guy.
I remember that feeling.
I was the student. Okay. You know, they were, God, my father was a workaholic all the time. He grew up when he didn't have a father. His father died when he was 4. So I'm not sure if he actually knew what it was like to be a dad that was involved in your life other than providing financially. So my dad worked all the time. Nights, weekends, vacations, didn't matter. So my mother was the one that kind of raised us more day in and day out. And, you know, it was, I mean, listen, you know, one brother's a dentist, one's a lawyer. I'm a business guy at this point. So clearly there was a drive for hard work and being the best version of yourself. Nothing was ever good enough. And you can look at that in a good way or a bad way. You know, for me, I like the fact that nothing was ever good enough, meaning nothing was ever the end. Okay, there was always something else that you could actually learn. My mother was a world traveler. She loved more than anything to travel. So we actually, as a family, traveled a lot. So we always met very interesting people. My father was a trust and estates attorney. So his clients were always very interesting people. So it was a fascinating time growing up in such a fortunate environment where I could focus on what I needed to, which is getting educated.
Yeah.
I didn't have to struggle with, oh my God, I was so cared for, even in terms of financially. I had so much, protection and support around me that it allowed me to just focus on, education.
Yeah. I think it's incredible that you switched jobs so frequently.
Rapid fire.
What did you learn from, I use the word quitting. I know it has a connotation with it, but I do believe that knowing when to quit and when not to quit are what separates failures from successes. Because if you stick with something too long and you don't quit, you could still fail at it when you should have just switched. So I'm curious, with that in mind, is there things that you learned from, I don't know, pivoting, quitting, switching jobs?
It's interesting. When I think back, there was never a moment where I was like, I hate this, I'm leaving. Never.
Okay.
I loved everything. I had great relationships.
Yeah.
It was always feeling as if once I identified the things that I learned from there that I can take somewhere, then I felt like, okay, it was time to actually learn something else where I could acquire some new skills. So it was more of an appetite for learning something else versus something negative that I was trying to avoid. Because there was never, I don't remember ever, there was a moment, and working in retail, there was a moment saying, oh God, I hate this, please let me go look for a job. I have never looked for a job. And I don't mean that in a cocky manner. I don't ever remember looking for a job, meaning I was without work. It was always something that just happened as an opportunity while I was working. And it just, times were actually right. And I felt like I could identify those skills that I learned from there. And in fact, I think I have relationships with every place that I've left. I've never actually had a bad breakup professionally.
Okay. So then how did your relationship begin with DreamWorks?
Oh, God. Such a great story. I moved out to California. So let me just finish the New York part and
Sure.
I'll get there. So
Sure.
My last job, after I got my degree, my master's from NYU, I got a job at CBS Television, okay? Right around the corner of 57th Street, the broadcast center. And I was doing all the financial planning for things like local and network news, Dan Rather, Eye to Eye with Connie Chung, As the World Turns, and when Letterman came over to CBS from NBC. So building out the Ed Sullivan Theater and things like that. At some point, my brother decided that he was going to move out to California to pursue entertainment law. Okay, he was a litigator in New York. And he kept on saying to me, why don't you actually move out and you'll stay with me and you'll figure it out? Because I really wanted to pursue working in entertainment, but I didn't know what capacity. I mean, at some point, if you'd asked me, I'd probably say I wanted to be an actor. I'm sure that came up. So so I was working for CBS for probably about 2 years, and CBS offered to transfer me to work in California. And it was the one time where, again, my parents were like, this guy has not been taught a good enough lesson. I said no to the transfer because I felt it was disingenuous to basically accept a job where I didn't know I wanted to end up. So I just quit, okay? And I moved out without a job. That was the first time in my life that I had been unemployed and I was actively searching for a job. Yeah. So I moved out to California 1 year after the Northridge earthquake. Okay, which was 1980, 1984, 1985, something like that. 1993, $3.94 or something like that. And I ended up getting a job at Hanna-Barbera Cartoons in business development. And the funniest part about that interview was I was sending out my resume to a bunch of different places at this point. And clearly I might have been a little bit confused because I show up at this interview and the gentleman who had written the job rec, okay, was this gentleman, CJ, and he was the hiring manager. And he sat me down and he said, so tell me, why do you want this job? And I recited for him all of what I recall from the job description, and I kind of regurgitated why I thought I'd be a good match. And he basically looked there, and you could tell that he was confused. And he said, I got to tell you, that sounds all great, but that's not what this job is. He goes, I think you are remembering a different job rec. And I said, well, no, I'm pretty sure. And of course, the fact that I'm arguing with this person, clearly I had lost my mind. I don't know who I was. And I was telling him, no, I was right. He was wrong. And he said, no, I wrote the job rec. That's not this job. You must be confusing it with something. And he said to me, but listen, I really like you, okay? And I think you're a good guy. I think you're a smart guy. So I will allow you one way to redeem yourself. I'm like, okay. And finally, I think my tail between my legs, and I'm like, I'll do anything. Yeah. I'm so embarrassed. He said to me, if you can sing the theme song from the Flintstones from beginning to end right now, we can start the whole process over and I will forget this ever happened. And you know it, I stood up in front of whoever was there and I sung, I sang that theme song, and he started, he said, hi, my name is CJ, what's your name? And started all over again, and I ended up getting the job. How embarrassing. Funny. That was just unbelievable, but that is a 100% true story. He made me sing the theme song to get this job.
Do you think that was to see if you had more of a personality?
Yes,
or?
I think, how would I recover? How would I recover from a damage? Because clearly I was damaged goods. I mean, I'm arguing with the guy, okay, about the wrong job, and I'm still trying to convince him that I'm right and he's wrong. Yeah. Okay, this is a bad situation. How is this guy going to recover and impress me? Okay. So anyway, I worked at that company for a couple of years, and the company was bought by Warner Brothers because Hanna-Barbera was owned by Turner, okay, which was partnership with Cartoon Network. We started out this very cool business partnering with the Bechtel, one of the Bechtel family members, Gary Bechtel, whose family built the Channel. One of the Bechtels was a owner of a Winston car, stock car race, and they were looking for a sponsor. And Hanna-Barbera pitched to them the notion of Hanna-Barbera being a sponsor of one of their cars. So for the first time ever, as opposed to Marlboro or
cigarettes.
Bud Light or whatever, it was all themed for kids. Okay, and Bechtel was just like, this is unbelievable, and NASCAR was, this is the coolest thing. I'd gone to events where there were hundreds of thousands of people there, and there was nothing for kids other than flipping tires. And the notion of finally bringing the sport and opening it up for kids and families in the right way, at least from my perspective, I thought this was a great opportunity. Talk about a licensed products heaven. Yeah. It was amazing. So anyway, that went really well. It was very successful. And Turner was bought by Warner Brothers. They asked me if I would actually move to Atlanta to help run that business. And at that point, DreamWorks was formed, DreamWorks SKG. And I just said that's the first time I was like, I want to work there. I have got to figure out how to get in there.
Why?
And it was a startup company with these three guys, Spielberg, Katzenberg, and Geffen. This is going to be successful, and it's a startup, and I want to be there at the beginning I want to figure out how to make myself crucial, to this business. And I don't know how, but I'm going to somehow get my foot in the door here. And I wrote a letter to Steven Spielberg. And I introduced myself. And I was a nobody, and I'm sure it went to probably 3 or 4 of his assistants, and I got a letter back at some point.
What did the letter say? Or do you remember?
It was I tried to introduce myself by saying, I'm a young New Yorker who moved to California. I went to undergraduate someplace. I went to graduate. Here are my degrees. Here's my experience. Clearly, I'm somebody that, because I also performed. I said, I can not only do the financial stuff, the marketing stuff, the operational stuff, the sales stuff. I'm a hard worker. I don't care about positions, title, or money. I said, I just want work experience at an amazing place. And between the 3 partners that have formed, I can only imagine this is just going to be something that probably I'll get one opportunity of a lifetime to be a part of. And I'd love to be considered for anything at the company. I got a letter back just saying, hey, listen, thanks for your inquiry.
From him?
Well,
was it
I'm
his
sure.
office?
Yeah, I'm sure
Cool.
it's the office of, and it just basically said, putting together the business plan, and thanks for your inquiry, and we'll keep you in mind. It was
Great.
very, very nice. It was very form letter like. I'm sure he got, or they got, thousands of inquiries.
Yeah.
So I'm sure they weren't not necessarily looking for people. And what was really fascinating, I was still working for Hanna-Barbera, and I got a phone call about 2 months later, from somebody who asked me to come in for an interview. And I went in for an interview, and it was a person who came, who worked for Disney, who was brought over when Jeffrey Katzenberg left Disney. Lots of people came over from Disney. So DreamWorks was heavily populated by Disney people, ex-Disney people. Right. I wasn't one of those. And I met with this gal, and we just hit it off incredibly well. She was the head of operations, trying to set up operations and finance for animation. And she asked me to come on board to be a financial analyst for the animation group. And so I was a budget coordinator guy, budget guy for the animation group. So I immediately got placed into the division of animation inside the broader company, DreamWorks SKG, which had lots of divisions. And that was the beginning of this crazy 22-year career at DreamWorks.
Wow. I have a number of questions, starting with, so you're there, you get the job. This is the job you want. And could you classify it as a leadership position, eventually what it became and what you did?
Yeah, for the very beginning, it was definitely not. I was, responding to whatever the needs were. And then, it was a place where, because the executives of the company decided to form a company with much less structure by title, water kind of found its level. Yeah. And people who tended to be more leadership, who could take something and run with it, were the type that actually got quite rewarded. So for me, who wasn't very shy, who saw a need in a certain place, meaning, there were paper clips there. Let me organize all the paper clips for everybody because it's going to be useful at some point in the future or whatnot. Right. I was that type of person. I didn't care about pride, or I didn't care about title or level. I just cared about something had to get done, so I'm going to be the guy to do it, and made myself indispensable. Because it was like, well, at some point over time, people started to call me to ask me things that were not underneath my job responsibility necessarily, just because it was like, Bruce is going to know. Yeah, he's the guy. He somehow knows about these things. Let's just ask Bruce. And I think just through many, many years of that, and through building some confidence between me and my boss, eventually it turned into a pretty big leadership position. My last title before leaving was I was effectively the chief operating officer and the title of chief financial officer for the animation division inside of Universal.
How did you learn about, how did your knowledge of leadership evolve? And what did you learn? Were there standout moments that happened that you grew from?
Huge. I have to tell you, at the very beginning, I was the guy who I wanted to prove myself so badly that I never thought through some of my actions carefully enough. And I'll give you what I mean by that. There was a moment when I was then a leader of the company. It was probably 15 years ago. And for 3 years prior, my boss, who had become the president of the company, had suggested that I go and do one of these 360-degree leadership reviews. Okay, they're very intensive programs where everybody around you fills out questionnaires about you, and then you get sent off for a week, and they basically tear you apart. They break you down to your core, and they tell you about yourself, both in terms of who you are from all of your filling out forms, as well as who you are from a perception point of view about everybody around you. So your people that work for you, the people that work at your level, and the people who are your boss. Okay,
Could be helpful.
Yes.
Or detrimental to a...
Not necessarily detrimental, but it could be very damaging and very painful because, we all live in a world where, we are who we are. We actually perceive ourselves to be something. Other people have a perception about us. And all three of those things I just defined could actually be not the same person.
Yeah.
So you have who you really are, who you think you are, who other people think you are. Okay. So for about 3 years, I said no. I said, I don't want to go to this thing. I wasn't ready because it was like, are you ready to hear the truth?
Yeah.
I'm not sure if I was ready. So I finally agreed to it. And I went to this offsite thing for a week. And I came back, and the first day, they actually review everything of what people wrote. And they basically tear you down to your core. And I have to tell you, most of the room, if not all, were in tears because you learn things about yourself that you had absolutely no idea about. And one of the things that I had learned was, as much as I thought I was a great boss and a great leader, the response from all the people around me was that I had very poor balance in my life. I was all work, okay? And I didn't care about anybody. I didn't have that personal side to me. And it was very interesting because I'm the most sensitive person. I care too much about everybody, about what people think of me, what I think of others. I want so badly to take care of people. But what I forgot is just because I feel that way doesn't mean that my actions are actually letting other people know how I feel. And unless you actually carry that through with some type of action, okay, people wouldn't know that about me. So it turns out that, for my whole career, when I was growing to that point, because DreamWorks owned me, okay, and I don't say that negatively, but they paid my salary. When I got to work, it was all about work. I never, at the beginning of the day, stopped to ask how somebody's night was, or if they had a family, or if they were married or had kids, or a dog, or what neighborhood they lived in. I never actually asked questions about them to get involved in their life personally, because I just thought any minute of doing that was taking away from my being productive. Now, by the way, that's great, and I was super productive, but at what expense? Okay, I didn't have the people who worked for me to actually care, to think that I cared about them. Okay, and by the way, one of the biggest lessons to learn is, in my whole career, it's all about the people. Okay, it's not about the output; it's about the people and the way in which you get greater output. You could find greater any way you want, better quality, more. Who cares? It's all whether people have an investment in it, and when they care, when it means something to them, when they feel important and they feel part of something. And it wasn't until that moment, which is probably 15 years ago, it's probably 5 years or 6 years into my career there, that I recognized, oh my God, this is not the real person that I am, okay? I actually do care, and I need to start showing that I care. And it wasn't until that moment that I started, coming in and asking people, how are they? And I started to ask people, and I wanted to meet their families and talk about their kids. And I got to tell you, from that point on, my career just basically shot up. Meaning that was a pivotal moment where I think I changed when getting a self-realization of who I was versus who I thought I was. Versus what people actually really are drawn to. Why do people perform? Okay, I don't mean performing musically or singing or dancing. I mean, why do people do what they do? At least the company that I was at, it wasn't really to get a paycheck as much as it was to be part of something. Yes, you get a paycheck, but it was to be a part of a community. And that was a major moment for me, realizing where some of my flaws were, and that if I wanted to really excel, I needed to change that.
You're bringing up a really good point.
because in this last year, I've learned it's not what I say that matters, it's what you hear. That's how you perceive me. You know, I can think I'm being a certain kind of way right now, but it's really, you know, how do I come off to you? So that's a really, really, really great point.
I have to tell you, along the lines of hearing, okay?
Yeah.
One of the most important lessons I have ever learned, okay, in my entire career was to listen more than you speak. It is the most powerful tool ever. When I actually speak a lot, okay, I like hearing what I like hearing my voice. I want to get my point across and whatnot. When you spend more time listening, people tend to volunteer information. You learn so much more about people where you don't need to say as much. And the lesser words you're now using, each word is more impactful. So the lesser you speak, the more your words are more meaningful.
Yeah. Yeah. Logistically speaking, after that review panel that you went through, how did it affect meetings, interactions? Were you consciously like talking to people about their families before a meeting began? Or was this more like hallway conversation in the office?
It was never in formal settings because I didn't want it to distract from the productivity side of it.
Yeah.
But it was in hallway conversations at the commissary. Like I would never. DreamWorks provided a full commissary that was free. Okay. And my mode was I'd run there, get some food, run back to my office. I'd never have lunch. It was the first time that I stopped and said, you know what? It's actually okay to stop and have lunch with somebody. Okay. I socialized more. Okay. Between meetings. Or I called people on Friday to basically say, hey, by the way, have a great weekend. You know, even little gestures like that. I had another instance that happened 10 years after that where I came across a gentleman that we had recruited from Nickelodeon to start up our television group at DreamWorks. And very interesting person that very clearly focused on the people side of everything. The most incredible relationships that I've ever seen in terms of people that will do things for him that are just extraordinary.
Yeah. Okay, so I want to talk about negotiating. When to let go of a point, when to hold on and push through a point. What have you learned about that?
So it's for sure an art, not a science.
Okay.
Okay? And what I mean by that is clearly you start a negotiation because you have a point of view of where you want to end up.
Right.
Okay, you have something you're trying to actually get to. I want to close that deal, and I have X amount of money to spend or whatnot.
Right.
I think you got to break it down because immediately you know, just in terms of just general nature, people, okay, want to negotiate. Each party wants a deal.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So already, at least I go in with saying, all right, here is where my starting place is, and here is the things that are just not that important to me.
Yeah.
Okay? And here is my non-negotiable. Here's the place where unfortunately, this is where I stop and I won't budge further than that. I just can't.
Right.
So that's from my point of view. I have to assess that without even meeting the other person. I have to actually assess where are my volume control? Where are my levers? Okay? And by the way, in prep, if somebody just walks in and wants to negotiate cold, it's just not a style of mine because I just don't think you've done your homework to basically say, well, what's important to me? You know, forgetting the other person.
Yeah.
Then you flip to the other person, and literally, it's a style thing.
Right.
There are, you know, some people, and either you know about it because you've done business with them, or you're just feeling them out cold. And I think through the conversation, you're starting to actually understand what's truly important to them. And, you know, I got to tell you, the most important part is to recognize, and you mentioned it before, to recognize when is pushing too far. You have to know what's truly important to them. I'm in the middle of doing some kind of negotiation with a company abroad. And it's very interesting because I'm coming with a financial angle. Okay, I know that this is how much money I want to spend. And I'm even thinking in order to get them to do what I want, I'll pay them certain money. However, turns out they're actually not interested in money. So my tactic, which is to give them money to do some things, is actually not going to work here because they're not driven by money. So until you know who's sitting at the other side of the table, the things, the levers that you thought that you're willing to use, they could be not effective.
Yeah.
But you're not going to know that until you either have done your research and know the other people because you've talked to people who have done deals with them, or you're actually discovering it along the way. So having a real conversation, by the way, it's all about a relationship. Okay, every one of my deals is about a relationship,
Right.
which means you first have to build that rapport
Yeah.
so that there feels like there's some kind of a bond or a trust that will live beyond the deal. Because honestly, I want to be friends. I mean, you're not going to be best friends,
Right.
but I want to be friendly with, because if I'm doing a deal, I'm hoping that there will be another deal in the future.
Of course.
So you don't do it thinking I'm going to burn this bridge and I'm going to close this one deal and I'm done. I just think that that's a real shallow way to think, and it's very short-sighted.
When you found out that they're not driven by money, was that something you found out from listening, or is that something they just was obvious in your research?
I knew it before because of another dealing they had, but I wasn't positive, and it wasn't until exploration, having conversations, and they were forthcoming with me about saying I didn't offer money yet, but I said, listen, why don't you help me understand what are your priorities? What do you hope to get out of it? And what's most important to you? Because I want to make sure that what I actually come with responds to what you guys are looking for.
Right.
So some people will be forthcoming and some not. These folks were.
Yeah.
And they were very clear of saying, listen, it's all about the environment. It's all about the pace.
Yeah.
It's all about making sure that in this particular case, nobody felt like it was going to be a factory.
Okay. All right. Okay. So then in terms of pitches, have you seen or been a part of any sort of pitching? Have you been on either side of the table for pitching? And if you've had someone pitch you something, is there a remarkable one that you've seen and like the qualities of a person or something that came out through it?
Yeah, gosh, I have been a part of a lot.
Yeah.
Okay. I'm sure many people have been a part of a lot more than me. The one thing I can say is the person who's pitching is key, critical, the most important thing in the room. I have seen an amazing director pitch a great and a terrible idea, and both of them, this person could sell. So the energy and the passion, okay, and the simplicity of a pitch is key. Okay. I mean, I'm in the middle. It's very funny. We'll probably get to talking about that. But outside of entertainment, I'm in the middle of working in a startup. Okay.
Right.
And the startup has to do a very similar thing. They're pitching, okay, this idea for people to either be customers or people to invest.
Right.
It's no different. I'm selling something and somebody's buying something and whatnot.
Yeah.
And I got to tell you, the notion of how to actually connect with somebody, okay, and who the person is that's pitching it is key, because I've seen the exact same product being pitched by two different people, and one goes like gangbusters success,
Yeah.
and one tanks. And it's the exact same product using the same relative words. So the pitch, the actual act of, and the energy, okay, and the leaning forward, and the passion, and the eyes, so much of it is visual. It's not just in the actual words.
Yeah, it's the energy you give out.
Absolutely.
That's so fascinating.
It's fascinating. I love pitching.
Why?
I think it brings me back to my actor moment.
Yeah,
where
yeah, okay.
I love you turning it on and being the performer. Also, in this particular case with this new company, I love when you get people to actually think, okay, think about a solution.
Yeah.
Instead of actually telling them what this is, okay, I'm actually leading them into storytelling moment, okay? Imagine if you could, and all of a sudden you can see them start to basically, in the back of their head, they're already in storytelling mode. So I've now opened them up to hearing a story versus, all right, so what I have here is, there's no opening there. I'm now in a give mode. Right. You're in a receive mode, but I haven't entered in.
Yeah.
But the minute you go into storytelling mode, they're kind of almost closing their eyes, imagining because I've actually asked them to do that.
Yeah.
So it's very interesting. It's very enticing. It's very romancing. So that the method by which you do that, and every time I've heard a great pitch, it actually uses that type of tone. It starts by engaging you in, okay, imagine a world where it's like a trailer.
Yeah.
Okay. If you imagine how you hear trailers,
In a
forgetting the
world.
yes, it just allows you to escape today and say, I want to place you there. Come with me there. And those they work so well. I've seen them work so well.
That's so fascinating.
I love it.
So going into common themes among like heavy hitters in the industry that you've come across, producers, network executives, directors, are there common themes among these heavy hitters, or have you noticed any through lines, so to speak?
Oh God.
Which one? Or
Listen, some of it is personal. Okay. I love confidence, and I'm really turned off by cockiness. So when somebody comes in and they sell, or if I'm witnessing that arrogance, I'm already in a fighting stance. So I'm not actually as open to listening. I'm already on the, I don't think so. So there's a style, okay, of confidence that I'm really, really attracted to. Because by the way, if you're not sold on it, how are you going to sell me on it?
Right.
But the minute you're cocky, then you think you know more than me, and that already puts me on the defense. I don't like that. So
it's a fine line.
It's a style thing.
Yeah.
But I'm not sure if I can actually. I mean, it takes all types. There are some that are hard pitches and soft pitches from the same individual. So I'm not sure if I've seen tremendous common themes. And I've worked in just animation. So whereas some of the big names that you might imagine, they don't really sit in the animation world. So animation is still relatively young as opposed to you think about live action movies, which goes back many years before. So it's still a young-ish community.
It really
there
is.
isn't that many. You don't find that many that have directed that many movies. There are a couple. I mean, when you think of the people that directed Toy Story things, they've directed quite a bit. But it's still relatively young.
Yeah, it is. It is. Is there in that vein, or even in entertainment as a whole, more content you want to see like more of? Or things you wish for more of?
Again, I gravitate heavily. I love animation, and animation basically says fantasy to me. It's places that I can't actually go that I want to see in a different version of. So I love fantastical worlds, which is why I've just loved animation. Even though you can do that in CG, you still get to suspend even more reality when you actually deal with animation, because usually it's with characters and not humans.
Right.
So in CG, in the Marvel comics, okay, you still have to fight the rules of gravity.
It's a human.
It's generally still like, I know how arms bend, and there are certain things that if something were to be weird, it almost feels awkward because you still have some rules of engagement. And once you actually build a full animation world, there are no rules. You're actually building the worlds. I'm actually learning it now, because one of the things when I left DreamWorks is I decided that there was one project that they were working on that I would love to work on and write.
Yeah. Okay.
So I asked if I could actually develop it on my own, and they said yes. So I've been working on it, and it's exactly what I'm just describing, which is you are trying to create a new world, and the new world defies the rules that we grew up in.
Yeah.
And I'm trying to figure out the right way to introduce a new world, okay? A world where gravity doesn't necessarily apply. Now, again, you and I can understand, well, gravity, great, that's easy. Just imagine them on the moon. Yeah. I get it. That's an easy one to describe. There are some others where from the day you were born, this is what happens when such and such happens. And what if I actually tell you, that's actually not true. You only have been convinced that way, but actually the truth is something else that you weren't aware of. Yeah. It's that explosion moment of, oh my God, I didn't even know that's possible. And that's the part that I get very excited about. So I'm working on a project like that.
See, the way you even describe it, it's like, I want to see that. Like, what is that? You know what I mean? That's like right where my mind goes. I'm like, wait, what was I taught? This is a tooth fairy, Santa Claus. What am I thinking about? So that's really, that's interesting.
I don't think you can get that degree of investment, okay, in a live action movie. I'm sure you can, again, with science fiction, but it's still usually based on human. Yeah. And humans still operate with certain laws, how humans think, They're talking in their mouth. There's certain things that you just assume, well, I know what that's going to be.
Well, yeah, even like in a cartoon, they have an idea on the light bulb above the head. It's much more believable for me to see that above a cartoon's head than your head.
And I like that. We all live in a world where, you know what? There are things that could be better about this world right now. Yeah. Okay? And I like the fact that you can actually build another world where I can leave all that behind and I can create a great world that basically I can leave all the crap behind.
Are there any animated films you're a part of that you think really hit? I mean, a lot of them hit the mark, but things in them that you're like, oh, that's what made a great animated film. As in, is it the story of the character, the structure, the way it's animated, the art of it? Is there anything that comes to mind?
Okay, so you're asking me personally, which is the only way I can answer. And for me, sophistication and complexity is not something that actually hits me. I like simplicity of just character. Okay, so the ones that have just pure character. For example, I'll go back to How to Train Your Dragons, the first one. Yeah. Okay, the relationship between Toothless and Hiccup, okay, is a relationship with me and my dog. And I gotta tell you, when I saw it on screen and I saw him reach out and just try so gently to actually approach and touch Toothless, and there was that first reaction, and finally they connected, it sent things through my body that you just can't control. It was like an uncontrollable moment where your muscles kind of flap around. My body lost its sense of control because it just hit its core. When there are, these animated films that have these relationships that connect, that are just simple, okay? I just love, and I want to see them over and over. I'm one of those guys that just watches a movie over and over. I've seen some movies 100 times, and I can continue to see them over and over again.
Yeah, because they hit on the core emotions of it.
It is. I'm not one. I mean, some of the movies we did were really complex, and they were beautiful to watch, and they got great awards. Yeah. But for me, simple, okay, is way, way better. Okay, it just hits me more.
And funny enough, I can't speak for all children, but I imagine that's what hits younger minds more too. It's the simplicity of an emotion.
Simple and color.
Simple
love. It's very funny. I have a friend who he believes that he can tell you if an animated movie is going to do well or not. And I said, I really want to know the answer to this.
Yeah, what's the code?
And he goes, color. He can actually see a trailer of a movie, and he will tell you. He goes, this is going to be successful just based on the color palette.
Wow.
And I have to tell you, he's usually right on. I hate to admit it, but he's usually right on. If that's the case, by the way, we can all just do a real quick color pass at the very end of the movie, okay?
Just a wheel.
And exactly. And just change all the colors to whatever his color palette is, and hopefully turn that into a success. I'm just not sure if it really works that way.
Yeah,
I'd like it to, but no.
Yeah, that's funny. Most memorable moments in entertainment. I imagine there's many, and there'll continue to be many more. Conversations at galas, or an elevator conversation. Is there anything that stands out in your mind as memorable, taught you something, got to ask someone a question that you wouldn't speak to?
There are a lot. I'm trying to think of a couple. I think I'm going to name just a few that were just unbelievable. One was when DreamWorks went public, and I got to stand in front of the New York Stock Exchange, to ring the bell and stuff. I thought that was just, whoever thought that you could be a part of that in your entire life. That's a once-in-a-lifetime thing that sat there with David Geffen and Steven Spielberg and Jeffrey Katzenberg. And that was a mind-blowing moment. I think the one of the coolest moments that kind of this one's going to be great to talk about, because it started to strip away levels, hierarchy, of individuals, and I'll explain. So at DreamWorks, we were doing a presentation up in Northern California, and we were partnering, I believe at that point, with Intel Corporation. And the chairman of Intel was going to be there. It was the chairman or the president. It was one of those two going to be there. And Jeffrey was actually going to be speaking. He was the keynote speaker at this event. Okay. And I want to believe, I might be confusing, but I want to believe it was the time where the movie Spirit was coming out, and we had flown Spirit, okay, up there to be part of this event, the horse,
Yeah.
okay?
Yeah.
And all I know is that Jeffrey was in the middle of rehearsing his speech. So I was in the green room waiting, and he just said to me, hey, do me a favor. Can you go hang out in the green room and entertain the chairman of Intel? And I got to tell you, the fear that took over my body of what could I possibly have to say to the chairman of Intel, just the disparity in just levels, okay, were so broad in my brain. I was petrified. I was uncomfortably, just scared. And I went in the room, and it was just me and him and some of his folks. And first of all, he was just so nice. And the whole time he was just talking about how cool it must be for me to do what I do. It was all about me. Whereas I walked in there thinking the levels between him and me are so miles apart. And he actually just stepped down far enough to almost put me at a level above him in terms of just, wanting to ask me about my fascinating career and what I do. And of course, we had a million things to talk about at that point. And it was the first time that I realized, wait a second, I'm just a human with another human, and I have a voice, and I have opinions, and I'm an interesting person. And, I led up to that moment with just fear, and I left with such confidence. And I couldn't have even imagined that. I would be like, never put me in that situation. And yet after that, I was kind of like, that was really great. Like, I had a great evening that time.
Yeah. Asking, I'm a little curious on these, and we'll keep this part short, on new content platforms where people consume content and videos being shorter, or people thinking that they should be shorter. Maybe people watch shorter videos. I know that's what I gravitate towards. Have you noticed that affect anything that you've created, are creating? Do you pay any mind to it? Is there anything you have to add on it?
Well, it's interesting. Listen, there's no question of how millennials and how folks are actually consuming content in terms of short, mobile, okay, just in the moment and whatnot. Yeah. So I think more things are being created for that. I don't think it's influencing what was going to be created as long form. So I don't think that it, okay, is actually changing what was going to be planned in that other medium. But I do think that it's inspired a tremendous amount of new content to be created for consumption, okay, in this new platform, in this new wave, okay, where everything is short, whether it be, couple of minutes to 20 minutes, consumable on the mobile device, so it doesn't feel like it's been crimped, and it actually feels like it was made for that.
Yeah. That's interesting. You bring up a good point. Sorry.
But no, by the way, the amount of things, because remember, re-edited for television, all of a sudden you actually squash and stretch and manipulate things. Well, you know what? That's not how it was intended. Well, what if it was actually created with the intention of being displayed on that small monitor? The attention to detail would be different. Okay.
Yeah.
Some things wouldn't be as important as other things. Maybe some of the background stuff is actually, it's not as high res because you just can't see anymore, and it's not meant to be projected on the big screen. Yeah. Therefore, it doesn't matter. So I think there's a different level of attention to what detail that gets seen on this new media. So I think you're prioritizing assets in a different way.
Is it just the editing, you think, or is it also like less characters in a shot, kind of like less things in a...
For me, I actually think it's going to have to be a little bit of that.
Yeah.
I just think you have so much less screen real estate, okay?
Yeah.
I also, I'm just in my own self, I always wonder, because when we were doing, again, animated movies and even television shows, when you have 22 minutes or 90 minutes to tell a story, or in some cases, you want to make sure it's only 80. And the directors are pushing back and saying, it's not enough time, I can't tell the story. And yet, some of the new platforms that are trying to do premium content for short form, my only question for myself is, that's so interesting. I'm curious how the creative folks, the directors, okay, who have been years fighting for more time to be able to tell a story and invest in a character with less time trying to do premium, how are you actually going to engage the audience so heavily with less time? Yeah. It's a question. It's more of a rhetorical question. I don't have the answer. I'm just curious to see how it plays out, because I can't, the more time we spend together, the more we actually connect. If I just came in and left, I'm not sure if we connect in that same way.
Yeah.
So in that same way with short form content, if it's very, very short and you only have a limited time with a character, okay, how are you actually getting under the hood and really developing a relationship with the character given the brevity of time? So it's just a question of mine. I don't have the answer. I don't know it.
Yeah, no, that's an incredible point, and it makes so much sense because in 10 minutes, if you have to tell a story in 10 minutes or you have like a short thing, how
invested can I be
Yeah.
in 10 minutes? And again, I'm not saying you can't be.
Right.
I'm asking that completely as a question because I don't know the answer. Okay, these movies that are the movies where you probably have the most investment. Okay, you need the reason the first act. And the reason the last act is the shortest is the first 2 acts, you're actually building all these strings that all of a sudden have people tugging and whatnot. Well, if all of a sudden I cut out so much minutes, how are you getting all of these hooks and these connections and these tugs and oh my God, I can't believe that's about to happen. I feel so bad.
because this happened to them at the beginning, and now I care about them.
So I'm just curious how it will play out.
You're raising a great question. Ooh, that's something I'm going to think about. Okay. You personally, I'm curious. How do you go about like scheduling your day, setting goals? I'm just like curious what, if anything,
No,
you're
that's
willing
so
to talk
funny
about.
that you talked about it. I'm actually in a quandary at the moment because for my entire life, I have been blessed by having an office and an assistant. Okay.
Okay.
And to go to having no office and no assistant and trying to schedule my day, because I started up a company, this year to basically just be a vehicle to run anything through it or whatnot. So
Right.
at least just from a liability point of view and whatnot. So I did that, and I'm involved now with probably 5 or 6 different companies, some of which are startups. And I'm on calls with them constantly, and many times it's actually in a car, and trying to figure out how to follow up, okay, and how to be as efficient as I used to be, knowing that I only have 2 hands, and hopefully one of those hands at least is on a wheel, okay? So you're trying to run an office, which is not really an office, it's just me, but trying to be as efficient with follow-ups and note-taking and things, it's really, really hard. Yeah. So, the one thing that I was told from before I stepped down was, I'm a religious wake up in the morning guy and work fiendishly all day. So I get up at 5 in the morning, okay, and I then work the full day. And that structure was important to me. So I wanted to make sure that I kept that structure, okay, even after stepping down from a day job, okay, one day job. So I still get up at the same 5 in the morning and still go to the gym in the morning. So I still have a tremendous amount of routine. And then I start my regular day. I built one room in my house to be an office, and it is really, really an office with a file cabinet and computer and a scanner and a printer, all that kind of stuff.
It's an office.
I needed to make sure that it was office-like and that it had doors that you can actually close and windows so it didn't feel cocoon-like. So I wanted to make sure that in any places where I can set myself up for success, I wouldn't find an excuse out of it to make it fail. So the office should have certain things in it, and it should be quiet and separate and feel good and have all the equipment that you need in it. But keeping track of everything, working for many, many different companies that are all completely separate. And even, in the middle of a call where you're like, oh, you know what? I need to make sure to connect you. And Clayton needs to I'm going to do a follow-up call, and I'm going to do a conference call and refer them to them. Well, I got to tell you, there are many times I just cannot jot down something when I'm in a car.
Yeah.
So trying to make sure that I'm being incredibly efficient and follow through properly, that's probably been the biggest challenge. I've also never dealt with traffic in LA before because everybody used to come to me. Because it was my office.
Right.
Well, now I'm going to everyone. So programming my time, I've actually tried to figure out every time that I'm actually in my car for a period, if I'm not doing a conference call, I am going to try to learn a new language. So I'm going to try to learn Spanish and French while I'm in the car, because I'm now in the car for hours a day.
Yeah.
And I thought, if they're for a bulk period, what if I turn those into productive hours and learn the language? Because there are, books on tape, those kind of things.
Why Spanish?
I just think it's a really useful language,
Okay.
as well as French. And, there's so many people speak it. I was like, I think it would be really applicable.
Yeah. What does the first hour of your day look like?
It's working out.
All working out.
Yeah, so I get up quickly and I head to the gym real quick.
Do you journal? Do you write down set intentions? Any of that?
I don't.
It-
But
how-
I'm a note taker.
Okay.
So I don't go anywhere without a book. And I even use a daily Franklin planner. Yes, I am that guy
Yeah.
that still keeps that business intact. Where I purchase a Franklin planner insert. But I'm a note taker. For things to commit to memory, I have to write them. So I have a yellow piece of pad, no matter where I am, and any meeting, I'm taking notes and writing down things.
Are you keeping those notes organized in a file cabinet? Like, do you hold on to them, or it's like
I
once
hold on to
they're-
everything, but I don't file them, meaning every page is just a stream of what's happening at the moment. So it's not journalized and sorted, but it is there, and I know how to find them. And with my brain, I just know, oh, that was approximately then, therefore it's in that pad that month.
Okay. So then now that you're not like in the office traditionally anymore, are you setting goals, or if you're setting goals or not, how are you going about it? Is it like monthly, daily, weekly, yearly? Is there anything that comes to mind on that?
Well, the goals are all different. Before the goals were the company goals.
Right.
Okay. And now that I'm working for many different companies, a lot of the goals are actually company goals that I have to get adjusted for. What can I do to accomplish the goals for that company? Okay. So I have different goals depending on which company I'm working for at that moment. Okay.
Yeah.
So there are personal goals. I mean, I got to tell you, it's very funny. When I stepped down, in April, I started to make a list of what was my next chapter going to look like career-wise. Like, what is my life going to look like after? Because 22 years of DreamWorks at one job, that's a chunk of time. So I didn't even know what life could look like after that. So I made a list, and I actually thought the list was going to look different than what it did. I thought it was going to have a whole bunch of material things, and I want to have a plane and whatever.
Go on vacation to the tropics weekly.
Have a house in so and so, whatever.
Yeah.
And I'll tell you, after the minute I left my job, I came for a week to New York to spend a week with my family, which I had never done. I'd never spent one full week. Okay, I'd always in and out for 2 days. So I'm not a great vacationer. I'm in and out quickly. So 1 week here was like, wow. And then I went directly from here to Brazil for Broadway Dreams. So effectively I had 10 or 2 weeks, of being retired, if you will, from my last job and in think mode of, oh my God, I'm going to go back to LA and I have nothing. What do I do for the rest of my life? And during my trip in Brazil, I started writing down notes. And I wrote down very few things that needed to be my next chapter or fill out the what the next chapter looks like. And they're not in any order, One was I wanted to be the best partner / uncle / family guy that I can be. Like, I wanted to show that, like, they come first before me, So, like, with all my nieces and nephews and great nieces and nephews, any reason that they wanted me to fly in, they had a special occasion, because I always was able to say no, because I was always working. I always had to say no. So for any occasion, I will fly in. So that was number one. Number two, I wanted to be very charitable, My job allowed me to be charitable towards companies. And now that I didn't have a job necessarily, how do I actually make that happen? Number three, I didn't care exactly what job I did. I only care who I do it with. So it's all about the people. Who do you work with? And again, to the same line as I don't care exactly what I do, but I care that I'm inspired by what job it is. So it's about the people and being inspired, that either the company is doing something great or interesting or fascinating or whatnot. And then the fifth one, which is the only materialistic one, is I just never wanted to fly coach airfare again. That was the only one I put on there that said,
like, no.
This is going to sound horrible, but I'm a nervous flyer, and I'm admittedly so. I have to get there extra early, and I'm a nervous flyer. And if I can just have just a little more space and not bored and get crammed in and have a place for my little bag above me and whatnot, it'll just make it just a little bit more tolerable. But that was it. And by the way, I have never sought out for a job yet since then. I've been so fortunate that, companies who found out that I'm not working have called and they said, hey, listen, would you come in and could you sit with us and talk to us? And would you consider being an advisor to the company? And it's been really, really cool. So I've been really, really fortunate.
Do you consider this like, it's the next chapter. I don't want to use the word retirement, but it's like more varied. Do you consider this retirement? Do you consider this just the next job, the next chapter?
I think I love saying the word retirement. Yeah. Or I like saying the word unemployed just because it just feels so freeing.
Yeah.
Where nobody owns me.
Yeah. Whereas
before they did, admittedly and voluntarily.
Yeah.
I was 100% committed to whoever I was employed by. Right. I'm definitely not retired. I'm definitely working as much as I've done in my entire life for very different reasons. I think this is a chapter of discovery. Okay, it's a chapter where I have been helped along the way by so many people. And how do I actually flip that? And how do I figure out how to help other people and not make the same mistakes that I've either made or have witnessed? And how do I create value? And you can define value any way you want. It could be just personal satisfaction. How do I actually create value in all these different places? Because I'm surely not shy of opinion. I'm an articulate person. I'm somewhat loud, and I definitely take the microphone and run. Yeah. And I just thought, how do I take advantage of some of these things and really help whoever would like my help? And I'm not going to push myself on anyone, but if they're asking me for help, I don't know how to say no yet.
Right. Oh, okay.
Not yet.
Yeah, that would be one of my questions for you is what have you learned about saying no? But
I don't know how yet.
Okay.
By the way, if it's no skin off my back, and if people say, well, do you have the time? The answer is I'll just sleep an hour less. Honestly, that's the answer.
Yeah.
I'll sleep when I'm dead.
Yeah, before we started recording, you were mentioning the level of interest you have in the process, not the end result.
Yeah.
That's everything. And that what you're doing now is essentially you can help people cut that, which is essentially what I do with my podcast. I'm curious if there's anything you can add to that in a second now. Not about like what you're doing, but your discoveries of the process, focusing on the process, not the end result.
Yeah, I got to tell you, the more interviews that I've had where people will ask, even youngsters or students or whatnot, that have basically asked for my help in going through their process, either through NYU or Binghamton, wherever. Right. It's very clear that so many people are actually focused on the end result and how do I get there? Okay, how do I get to success or whatnot? And the one thing that I constantly try to repeat, because it's something that I live by, is it's actually not about the end result. It is about the process. And the process along the way is you have no idea what type of discovery happens along the way. More things happen along the way than in the end. And therefore, if you just keep focusing on the end, you're missing the moment. I got to tell you, it almost is akin to the way that everybody lives their life now on the mobile phone. Okay, where they're not living in the moment, experiencing the moment. They're actually, on their phones, distracted by something else. Okay, and I would rather put that away to the degree that I can and actually just spend more time present and experiencing the process. Through even going back to Broadway Dreams, I never realized how fortunate I am and have been until I've experienced, what others have or don't have. And it's taught me a completely different perspective of saying, oh my God, I am so blessed. Okay. Don't forget that. And how do I actually help others to get, along their way so that they actually don't do the same mistakes or whatnot that I've done or I've seen. But enjoy the process. So we talked about, how many times is it just as important, if not more, to learn the things that you don't like, you don't want to do, rather than just the thing that you want to do. The odds are you're going to stumble along a lot more of the things you don't want to do before you find the one thing that you do want to do. Well, if you go about it thinking, I just want to find the thing that I want to do, then immediately you're setting yourself up for many years of disappointment, because then you're only searching for the one thing. Whereas if I'm actually interested in finding about all the things that I don't enjoy, I actually have successes along the way. I found out another thing that I don't like. This is great news. I know that sounds weird or odd, but I got to tell you, for me, it was great to say, oh, I never want to do that again. I'm so glad I learned that now versus in 5 years or 10 years. That was a blessing.
Yeah. Yeah. Do you have like a favorite failure or a parent failure that set you up for success? Or like a favorite, I know I don't like to do this?
Wow. Boy, that is on the spot. What don't I like to do?
If nothing comes to mind, it's all good.
I guarantee you there are many things where it's like, I never want to do that again. Listen, it's funny. There's one thing in business where, I've thought about, and I talked about this recently to somebody who launched a new show on Broadway, because when I was at DreamWorks, we actually did Shrek the Musical, and then we did the How to Train Your Dragon touring show. And the one lesson learned was, when you're going into a new business, unless you actually understand enough about the business such that you have to have an amount of respect toward the business that exists before you enter it. Okay.
Yeah.
There are certain rules that exist. Even if you're looking to change those rules, you still have to have a respect for the rules that exist. And I think the one thing lesson learned for me is to do enough research to understand the rules of the game before you're in it. Okay. To appreciate those and lean into those before you think you're going to come in because you have something better. Okay. To make changes to it. Just it's a weird way of just saying, listen, respect the fact that these things have been done for a long time because of some reason. That doesn't make it right. That just makes it the norm. Okay, such that doing something different from the norm, you should still do, as long as you recognize that you're basically fighting potentially an uphill battle. Okay, and leave yourself enough leeway. Okay, to actually find your norm, which is different than what was the norm.
Yeah.
So, when we set out even to do, some of the shows that we did, I think that we just, at least I thought we'd have more of an instant success because we were coming in with fabulous brand and IP and whatnot.
Right.
And I think, had I been smarter and had I basically saying, listen, this is how that business works normally. You need more weeks before this thing gets recognized by the community, and therefore just plan that. Even though you have something special, okay, let that be the surprise. Okay, don't plan that to happen.
Yeah.
So that was a humbling moment.
Yeah, that's a good point. That's a good point, to have respect for the things that exist before you try and shake up the industry. Like realize why it exists in that way. That's a great point.
Yeah.
Changes made that have increased positivity and decreased negativity in your life. Does anything come to mind?
Oh God. I got to tell you, attitude probably runs at the peak of that whole thing. When I've worked with so many people over the years, and when you actually get to pick and choose who the people you work with, okay, probably the thing over and above even skill, okay, that comes to mind is you want to pick the people who actually you enjoy, who actually have a positive attitude, okay? So just the attitude that you bring is the most important aspect and trait that anybody could actually have. You have to expect that, everybody will have skills and whatnot,
right,
but you can actually come at it either with half glass empty or half glass full. And it's just so much more enjoyable when people are just half glass full and thinking everything as, wow, this is so cool. It's funny. We used to talk about the notion of, well, this is going to be really hard, or this is going to be a challenge. And we say, how about we call that an opportunity? It's just the way to look at it. One of the early messages that I actually learned, and it's changed my life, when I was working, for indirectly Jeffrey Katzenberg. And I just remember that, the way you normally get programmed to work, okay, is it's a cover your ass, a cover your butt scenario, okay? Where if you ask me to do something very difficult, I'm probably going to assess it in my head. Then I'm going to say, you know what? That's going to be really hard because, or that's not doable because, meaning I want you to fly outside this window. Well, you can't because of gravity, okay? You'll think of all the reasons why you can't. What if I said to you, I want you to tell me how you could make that work, Okay? What are the things that would have to happen in order for it to be a success? And you say to me, well, all right, I'd need to suspend maybe underneath your armpits a balloon that has enough helium to suspend you, or maybe I'd have to wire you, or want you to fly, maybe attach it. Like there's
You get creative.
There's a different perspective of how can I versus why can I, and it's early on, because you can't say no to him.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So you just have to learn to and it's okay to basically say, well, I first have to suspend gravity. Okay. If I can suspend gravity, and it allows your brain to start to think about things that were not possible until you suspended that notion that stopped you from thinking that way. So the minute I tell you, let's pretend gravity goes away, now what? Your brain just basically blew up in a good way of, this gives me so much more opportunity. Now I have to think of, how am I going to actually make sure that the building stays rooted if there's no gravity? Like, your brain thinks a different way. And I just think, in all of these scenarios, so many things that have happened that go against what was the past. They never had that before. They never had a building that was 100 stories high. Well, how is that possible? How does the wind not blow it over? Well, at one point, that didn't exist because it wasn't possible. And then it was. And I just think the attitude of how to actually take each one of these approaches and just say, suspend that. Don't worry about that. Don't worry about money. Money aside. Okay. And by the way, for a finance guy, boy, that is not one you want to hear or say. But yet when said, it just suspends all those things that end up being a burden, that end up squelching, all types of creativity. And it just allows you to think about things that you never would have thought of before. Yeah. And I like that.
Yeah. Just all the walls, everything that you thought of. That's well said. There's nothing I really can add to that. In life, what do you appreciate most?
My family and my friends.
Yeah.
I've voluntarily, I have given up so much of my life for my career, and now I'm choosing to take it back because I don't want to miss anymore. So when there is an occasion, I'll fly. I'll fly intraday. I'll fly in the morning and fly back to LA at night. I don't care. So I that's the things that I treasure. The relationships, the people I've been beyond blessed. The Rolodex, even though nobody uses a Rolodex, but the list of relationships that I have made along the way from, as a child through CBS and Lord and Taylor and Hanna-Barbera and DreamWorks, I keep in touch with so many of them, and they are cherished relationships. And we all do amazing things for each other when need to. I can't tell you how many times it's called upon, I need a post-production expert. Oh my God, this is great. I need somebody that knows camera. Oh, this is great. I need somebody who's an editorial. I need a lighting expert who's a production designer. I need somebody to draw something. It's just, you build these relationships over time, and they're just amazing as long as you actually have to put into those relationships too. Yeah. They're not just there. They have to be watered just like a flower.
That's great. That's beautiful. Bruce, this has been amazing, to say nothing to say the least of that. This is just an incredible conversation. I'm so grateful that you would share all of this with me and share a bit about your life, what you've learned. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Really appreciate it. Usually I end with like a billboard quote, metaphorically speaking, word or phrase you could put on a billboard for millions of people to see. Does anything come to mind?
There's one statement that I have had on my desk that I have moved to my desk in my office that I live by.
Yeah.
Okay. And it is, vision without execution is hallucination. And I have that on my desk, and I loved it for years and years.
Yeah.
And I copied and pasted it, and now it's on my desk in my office.
I love that. Vision without execution is hallucination. Wow. On that note, thank you. This has been an absolute joy. Where can we find you? I know. That's what I mean.
Where can we find you? Wow. I'm not anywhere. What a hard. No one's ever asked that question. Well, I live in Los Angeles.
Yeah.
I constantly fly back to New York.
Yeah.
But I don't know. Well, we'll see. I'm entertaining some business ideas that maybe my name will resurface.
Okay.
In some capacity.
Yeah.
But until then, I'll just be watching and listening to all of you.
Yes. Absolutely wonderful. Bruce, thank you so much. Really, thank you.
My pleasure.
Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, Bruce Daitch.
You've been listening to Entertainment X, the podcast. You can follow Entertainment X on Instagram at _EntertainmentX_. If you haven't yet, go to Apple Podcasts and subscribe, rate, and review this podcast. Join Clay next week for another curiosity conversation on Entertainment X. Thank you for listening.